So you just got your new frame. Super excited to build it up. First, we should waterproof it. Let me show you how on Garage 31. So why would you want to take this extra step and waterproof your bike before you build it up? Well, the bearings, here, all the suspension pivots, the bearings themselves are made of steel. So if you don't apply grease to the surfaces of them and you ride in the rain or wash your bike, the water will corrode the steel, and even though these are sealed, the inside is filled with grease, but not all the way, and once they start rusting on the inside, they'll develop play very fast, and you'll have play in all your pivots. It potentially damage your frame, damage your hardware. So instead of taking this $10 step with some grease for when you first build your bike up, it can save you hundreds and hundreds of dollars down the line, just by protecting all the moving parts and making sure that they're all torqued. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the frame apart. We're working on this raw bikes here. We're going to take it apart completely. Then we're going to I'll show you all the bearings and the seals on this bike, which are pretty nice. Then we'll grease everything up, put it back together, and then the bike will be good for many years. Let's go. So on this particular bike, they have a very good sealing system. You can see the bearing there. It has a little bit of grease on it, but not a lot, or not enough. And then these are the kind of washers, spacers, and these do have a rubber seal on them, just there. So we're going to essentially fill this void up with grease, and then stick these guys back on. But first we got to take all the frame apart. So these guys are on there, down here too, down here, up here. So a little bit of work, but just some Allen keys, nothing too crazy. Now if you think this is pretty daunting with all different pivots, different bolts, what I do, if I'm getting confused, I grab a piece of blue towel, and then I write on it the various pivots here. So upper shock mount, rocker, lower main pivot, upper main pivot, lower shock pivot, and I'll just write all the letters down, and then when I take something off, I'll put it next to that part so that I can track, okay, so this guy here is an upper shock bolt because I left it next to the upper shock bolt. I'll give you an example of that. So here's a quick example: upper shock, lower main, etc. When I take the bolts off, I'll just lay them next to it so I don't get confused. So start with the easy stuff and just take all these guys off. These are all the same on this particular bike, and generally speaking, each pivot, so this would be the upper shock, the hardware will generally be the same. So now I have all the washers that were loose, I could take off without using a bolt or an Allen key. The rest of them, I'm just going to crack them all loose before I take one of them out, just in case one of them's too tight and I need the leverage of the framing on the stand. So this particular one's a 6. There we go. 5 for these ones. Now this lower pivot here is pretty unique. It's got a bottom bracket tool on it instead of an Allen key. So here's my tool. And it's pretty stiff. Okay, there. That's the tool fit in there. Now generally speaking, it's easiest to leave the chainstay and the rocker on till last. So we'll remove these bolts, and then we'll do these ones, and then we can take the chainstay, so the seat stays off, then we'll take the rocker off, and then we'll take this guy off. That way it'll just be easier. If you take this one off, then you kind of be fighting yourself, trying to hold it. So the permanent attached to the frame, so this guy here, we'll leave on last, take off this one. You take the whole seat stay off. There we go. Now we'll do the rocker. This guy here will probably need a soft face mallet because it's quite big. There we go, there's how to dismantle a raw frame in about 5 minutes. So if you notice, very little grease around here, basically no grease around here. Let me show you the other ones too. Rocker link, no grease, no grease, no grease. And all the hardware is bone dry too, so this is why we need to pack it with grease and stop any rusting happening. And now you can kind of see, you know, the upper shock mount is all labeled there, so it's easy to track what bolt goes where when you take the time to just write down where it goes. As for what kind of grease you should be using, I've used the Maxima grease a lot before. That's really good. But really any grease is going to be fine. I got this down at Canadian Tire. It was like 10 bucks. Farm and truck grease, it's going to be absolutely fine, especially on the aluminum frame. So let's get cracking. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a liberal amount of grease, and this is going to be pretty messy, but don't worry. I'm going to apply and completely cover the bearing on the outside and the inside. And I'm going to repeat that for all the other bearings. Okay, so that's that done. I'm not worried about having too much grease. We can wipe the excess off later, but now all these bearings are going to be protected, so we'll move on to the associated hardware with this one. So this is the upper shock one here. This is the rocker, the front triangle, seat stay. On this particular bike, these bits are all exactly the same, but we'll still do it anyway. So the upper shocks, we need 2 of those per bearing. Again, I'm just going to coat the inside with grease, and I'm going to stick that on the upper shock one, which is there. Repeat that for the inside. That one goes in there. I was going to take some disc brake cleaner, put it on a microfiber, and then I'm going to wipe the excess grease off. They may be thinking that's a crazy amount of grease, but grease is cheap. Bike shop labor is not, so there we go. All cleaned up. There's still grease in here, but that's okay. We'll use that for the pivot bolts. Now all these bearings are fully protected, and you're going to get at least a full season before you gotta take this apart and clean it up. And I've had friends who have done this for 3 years in a row and they're still on their original bearings, so definitely worth doing. Time for the chainstay now. Again, same process, liberal amount of grease. We want to fully cover all the bare steel parts, just like that. And we'll do chainstay parts here. And we'll stick these guys on. Backside. Again, now fully protected, so just a quick wipe. Well, if you haven't guessed it by now, we're going to do these ones too. So this big one, these guys, and on the backside, and we'll just do the other one here. Now, I'm not worried at all about the mess, so we'll just clean it up afterwards, but there we go. Now these guys are all set. So I just finished off putting the washers on, obviously filled the back with grease, give it a quick wipe down. So now all these bearings here are all filled with grease and ready to go. So we've done all the bearings and the washers. We now need to look at the axles. We want to put grease on the threads on the axle itself and the head there. That's going to allow us, one, it's going to be able to nicer to torque down to the spec it needs to be, and it's going to obviously stop the bearings corroding onto the axles as well. So bear in mind we started or we finished last with this guy, the main one. We're going to start with this one and work in reverse order. Kind of a, I don't know how you call that, extrusion there, which is going to center itself in the frame. So when we put this back in, we'll need to measure that, or be careful of that. So I'm going to apply grease to here and to here, and then we can start refitting this one. All greased up. So my chainstay, this one here, the rubber grooves go on the drive side and face up as the chain. So I'm going to push this on now, and because we greased these, they stay in place. Now we're going to try and line up the hole and then stick our greased axle through. And the excess grease that it doesn't need will just come out, but we'll just clean that out later. It's all good there. Apply some to the threads, and we can start putting the nut back on and tighten that down. You can use Loctite on the threads here. I tend to find that Loctite's not a good solution, in the sense that if you do this process, if you grease everything up and torque everything properly, the bearings won't corrode, so that the bolts won't come loose. Generally what you find is when the bolts are dry and they've got Loctite, the bolts bind on the seized bearings and then will undo the bolt. But if you greased everything from the start and you do regular maintenance, the bolts won't come loose because everything's greased up, everything's working smoothly, nothing's binding, and the bolt stays tight. Okay, so that's tight now, and we can see the movement. Very smooth. Perfect. Now we'll just clean all this extra grease off. Okay, next comes the rocker. Greased up. I greased the bolt too. So we'll stick this on. And try and get the bolt started. Sometimes you just gotta wiggle it in, or you can look down through the middle and just see if that's on there. And I'll just take the other side of the bolt. Tighten. See if it moves. Very smooth. Again, we'll just clean all this extra grease off. So seat stays next. I tend to put these ones in first at the back and then go down like this. Sometimes if you put this one in first, there's not enough room and you kind of butt against the top here. So I'm going to slide these guys in the bottom, stick my greased up bolt through. I'm not going to tighten this one all the way, I'm just going to tighten it just enough, and then we'll just do this other side here quick. Now time for these upper ones. I do really like the way that Raw has designed these shields here, this kind of, or seals I guess. They do work very well. And they hold together good too, so. Okay, so I just went through and just tightened all the rest of the bolts and the torque wrench, so just checked it all over. Now the frame works beautifully. It's going to be protected for at least a good riding season. Only took half an hour, 4 or 5 minutes if you're not very confident, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. And just by periodically doing this, replacing the grease, you're going to get years and years out of bearings, saving you hundreds of dollars. That was probably about like $1 worth of grease, and now the bike's absolutely good to go. It's going to have a lot of fun this year. If you found this video useful, leave a comment, subscribe, like the video too. If you want to see me working on anything else, just leave a comment as well. And if not, I'll see you guys next week. Thanks.